I'm Aileen Quinton. I'm from Enniskillen. My mother, Alberta, was one of the victims of the Poppy Day massacre in Enniskillen in 1987.
What age were you then, Aileen?
I was 29.
And how did you hear the news?
I was in London at the time, and I was actually crocheting a lace tablecloth for my mother as her Christmas present. And a flash came on, a news flash came on, and at first I was just so shocked. First of all, I thought I got it wrong, that I'd somehow imagined it, and I had hours trying to get through to Enniskillen, and friends came for me to wait at their house, and I rang an uncle, and he just answered and said, "Aileen, I'm sorry," and he broke down, and I knew, if there's any hope at all, you answered a different way, and I knew she was gone.
It changed life forever.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
You've been here today at the International Conference, and you spoke about forgiveness of perpetrators of terrorism. Can you explain to me, using that language, how you feel about the aspect of forgiveness and what it means to you?
Well, it's a very, very triggering word in many ways, particularly because of the way it was dealt with after Enniskillen and the pressure, to my mind, very damaging pressure that was put on us to forgive. And, sort of linked to what people call is Gordon Wilson's forgiveness of the IRA in his interview, except that he didn't. He talked, about dirty words aren't going to help anything, and what he said is nothing I could disagree with, but he didn't say that he forgave them. And I go with what my father always said to me: you should never hate people, just the things they do. But for me, forgiveness is more than not hating. It is in relation to the thing that's done. It's my acceptance of somebody's moral position to that, what they've done now. So that would typically include that they actually realise that it was wrong and have expressed that and have done what they can to make reparations. I mean, if it was stealing money, the reparation would be paying it back. They can't bring my mother back, but to me, to forgive somebody would be my acceptance that where they are morally is okay, and I can deal with that and I can accept that position. But I can't do that with people who aren't sorry or have not expressed that explicitly.
Aileen, there must have been so many things that proved very difficult for you without your mother. Is there one in particular that you would tell us about?
It is in so many things, and even now, sometimes, even though it's been so many years, something will happen and that I will think she would find that funny. It generally would be things that would amuse her, and I could hear her laughing, in my head. And, around the time, it was, of course, all the nice stories you hear about somebody when they've died that you never knew about before. And I remember the local Roman Catholic priest, saying to said, "Oh, Aileen, people are talking about her with such affection. I've just had an old boy in here telling me about the time she syringed his ears," because she was a nurse. And I just thought I could hear her laughing in my head, that something so prosaic for her was treated with such reverence by him, and so to be able to laugh about something like that with her, which of course you can't, because the whole reason you're hearing about it is because she's not there.
So you attended the conference today with SEFF, and you heard a lot of victims and survivors, their words. You shared your words. How do you feel today? How do you feel this evening?
It has been difficult, and it's not the day for it's the day for a waterproof mascara, so it definitely is. And hearing some of the things, especially sort of how a child is responding and trying to make sense of it. I wasn't a child, and I'm blessed with longer memories of my mother than some people have of their parent or whatever. But it's still just very good to actually hear people having their voice and being able to speak out, and actually so much common ground, even internationally, because we've had people from outside Northern Ireland, and sharing the same kind of thoughts and feelings.
We've had the representative from the Northern Ireland office and the Department of Foreign Affairs in the Republic of Ireland here today, making promises they will do their best on the legacy question. How do you feel about that?
It kind of colour me sceptical, and I'm not even saying that these people don't mean what they say, but I think people can mean that, but they can get bogged down on things. And I just think sometimes the bottom line with people like that is people like me don't matter as much as those who are acting on the behalf of the perpetrators.
William, you're here today at the SEFF conference, and you're in the company of a complete stranger to you until this morning, Chris Miller, who's a detective superintendent with the PSNI, and he is involved in the legacy aspect of what has happened in Northern Ireland. Did you know about the Troubles? Did you know what they were?
I knew somewhat of the Troubles and I knew somewhat of the Enniskillen bombing. I just didn't know the details of it, so like where it was or how much the scale it was.
And you were saying earlier in conference, Chris, that you really wanted your children to come to a conference like this to hear these stories firsthand.
Absolutely. I think education's key in this country to move on. I feel that my children would have benefited from hearing these stories firsthand today, which were very powerful indeed. They both are going through school, and to the best of my knowledge, anything on the curriculum, well, there's nothing on the curriculum, I believe, in relation to the Troubles. And anything that is touched upon in the history of Ireland or Northern Ireland is like just done from a historical sort of these dates, this happened, but it doesn't actually go into the detail of how that actually looked at the time.
What would you say to William? Like, talk to William now. What would you say to William? What would you say to each other about, you're both here from very different perspectives,
Very, very much
very different
so.
ages.
William, what I would say is we never want to go back to that again. It was a horrible, horrible time. And I had mentioned earlier that I was disappointed when I read an article recently about that there's a majority, or not a majority, but there is a certainly an amount of young people nowadays who actually state that they feel that they missed out by not growing up in the Troubles. Now, I don't understand where that comes from, but all I would say is it's definitely not a time to, reminisce about for me. I grew up in an area that was very much in the grip of paramilitaries. It was not a great time to be growing up. It's lying in bed at night, you hear remember the police helicopters up? You could hear all that. You could hear the shooting. I went to school in the city centre, and one of my biggest memories is actually walking down to do one of my A-levels and seeing the whole side. They blew up the Europa again, and the whole side of the Grand Opera House was just blown up. But people then were very desensitised to it. We just walked around it. The police had to just go around it. And that's the way it was. And everybody became very desensitised, and it was one of those things we would never want to go back. I would not want that for my children. But I also want my children to know about it, because I think if you don't know about it, you're always in danger of repeating it or reminiscing to a certain degree about it.
So William, it may sound like a bit of a movie script until you find out that it's real. Now, and you found out from your grandfather.
Yeah,
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my granddad works with SEFF, so he was able to tell me all the stories of the people he's interviewed and all that, and just maddening the
Were you
things that
shocked
happened.
by some of them?
Yeah.
I mean, when I talk about the Troubles, I talk about both sides. I talk about terrorism on both sides, violence on both sides. I don't distinguish between anything. And for me, I remember the Quinn brothers. Mm-hmm. That's one of the ones that sticks in my head, the Quinn brothers. Greystale sticks in my head. Growing up, during the time I was at university, probably during the time of the big feud, involving some members of C Company, as they were known back then. I'll not name names, but I think we all know who they are. And, it was not safe to go out. It just was not safe, to go anywhere, out for a drink or do anything.
So the responsibility now is not only to build the future, but to remember the past in order not to repeat the past. And that's what you're working at, and that's what you're living through.
I would definitely like to see it on the curriculum of every single school, and I would like to see it as some sort of, people come in and talk to my children, for example, about the dangers of alcohol, the dangers of smoking, the dangers of drugs, all those type of things. This is something I think that also needs to be spoken about. It's not a dirty little secret. It's history, and we are formed. It forms part of our history. but it needs to be spoken about for what it is and what it was.
What do you think about that, William?
Yeah, 100% agree, because if they don't learn it through school, they're going to learn it off social media like TikTok, where you don't have to be a teacher to be on there.
And that is the big problem nowadays, that growing up, we didn't have social media and things like that. Growing up with social media nowadays, it is a way to indoctrinate the children, the youth of today. Northern Ireland, whatever, can only move on if we can. It's the next generation that's going to save us, for want of a better
It's the
phrase.
Williams.
It's the likes of Williams in this world that's going to save us and move the country along. As long as there's social media, which is a way to get into all children have phones now, the way to get to them, as long as that's there. And people that are celebrating terrorism, that is another thing that people see on social media, and it romanticizes to me. And again, I'm talking about both sides. I make no division whatsoever.
All sides.
Yeah, all sides.
Well, I wish you both the best of luck in each of your endeavours, and I think you guys will cross paths again.
Absolutely.
So my name's Denise Mullen, and my father, Dennis, was murdered on around 10:30 on the 1st of September 1975. My mother was shot at 13 times as she tried to escape out through the rear window. I got up out of bed. I'd heard all the commotion. The house was like under construction. We were living in an old house belonging to that my father had inherited, and I got up out of bed. Bearing in mind I was 4 years of age, we had just come home that weekend from being away in Wexford, and my mother's sister Mary had been given my goldfish bowl and a couple of goldfish to look after for the weekend. And I remember walking past this window, and it was, as in old houses were, a window you could always make a seat out of. It was so deep, and I remember looking and saying into myself, thank God my goldfish isn't there, because it'd be dead now. Because as I looked to my right, there was these clay mud balls running down the wall, and that's how, by throwing those at the door on the front of the house, that they had alerted and my father had went out. I then took a few more steps and I saw my father lying there in the doorway.
And had he been fatally injured, or had he died already?
I would have assumed he had already died, because years later then I spoke to Dr. Gosh, who had attended my father, and he told me that my father would have died instantly. And then by getting the HET report, I discovered that my father had been killed from here to here, literally in this area here. I think it was something like 27 bullets, and basically was no wides. So I think with that he obviously probably would have died instantly.
Following that, your life was thrown into chaos. Your mother was seriously injured. You were just a little girl. And then your mum fell into mental health.
Yeah, she took
Issues.
basically sort of like a mental breakdown, and that went on for about over 10 years, or maybe 12 years. And during that time, my mother was maxed out in Valium and whatever other potion of drugs that were prescribed in those days. And I think that was a usual thing for somebody in such circumstances. And I've talked to other victims and survivors on both sides of the sector, and we've come to the conclusion that the root of all evil was Valium. And that's what we've termed it as, the root of all evil.
So really masking the pain.
Yes.
Not
addressing
allowing you
it.
to address
Yeah.
the pain. Now, you attended the conference today with SEFF. It was a very emotional day here in
was,
Lisburn. And you spoke publicly several times, and you say you're not a public speaker, but we could see that people were holding back tears when you were telling your story, because it's the story of a little girl who grew into a fine woman whose mother was still ailing, and then you're bringing up children yourself and carrying all that damage with you. How do you feel this afternoon?
I'm actually going home with so many thoughts and questions that I'd still like to ask, and questions that I'd still like answered. And in due time, please God, we'll have that again. But I've actually spoken to several people today, men and women, that have come up to me and from a diverse range of backgrounds. And I actually was somewhat pleased that then they shared their story with me. And basically, regardless of religion or what had happened to our loved ones, we're all one. And I think today proved that we certainly have suffered the same, we feel the same now about how the past has affected us. Next week, my father will be 50 years dead, and that's 50 years of pain. And today there were some people, you could hear the pain in their voice, you could see it in their faces, and I don't think it's ever going to leave us.
Do you feel like you're looking forward now? That you've got a group of people that you know
Oh,
you can rely on?
absolutely, yeah. And I really would like to meet up with some of those people again. In fact, a few of us have exchanged numbers, and I think that's important. And an event like today helps to build bridges, and I wish that there would be more people like us and more events like SEFF are organising for enable us to do that.
So my name is Juliette Scauso. I lost my dad in the September 11th terrorist attacks. He was part of Hazardous Materials Company 1 in the FDNY.
So that's the fire service.
Yeah.
And what was your father's name?
Dennis Scauso.
What was his nickname?
They all called him MacGyver in the firehouse. He could fix anything. And so anytime they couldn't figure it out, it was passed on to my dad. He was a very handy guy. He was actually a pilot before he became a firefighter.
And what age were you when your father died?
I was 4.5.
And what age are you today?
28.
So you've lived the last 23 and a half years holding on to those memories, those very early memories. But you do have memories of your dad.
I do. I think when you go through something traumatic at such a young age, and my brain just held on to those memories. And I have so many like fond memories. And I also just love hearing stories about him. So even recently I've connected with some of the other retired members of the fire service that worked with him. And it's very nice hearing about him and hearing that I'm like him and all that.
Can you remind us about how you found out as a child that your father wasn't coming home?
I mean, I can take you back to where I was at that moment. I think everyone remembers where they were when 9/11 happened. So I was in preschool age. I didn't have school that day, so I was dropped off at my grandparents' house. I was just with my grandfather. That man to this day always has the news on. I was playing in front of the television. I was playing with Jenga blocks in front of the television, and my cartoons flipped to the news very quickly, and I remember the imagery vividly. I mean, it changed the trajectory of my entire life. So I watched as the North Tower was on fire. I watched as the South Tower was hit. I watched as the South Tower collapsed, and then the North Tower as well. My mom had found out. She was a teacher. She left work early, came to pick me up, and then what followed was we picked up my other siblings. I don't think that there was, a sit-down moment where there was, okay, your dad's not coming home, especially as a child that young, but I was intuitive, like you could read between the lines. I knew immediately something wasn't right, and I knew what job my dad did. I knew even from the tension of my grandfather in the room and watching something so horrific on TV and knowing Daddy works in the city, you can put two and two together. And I think children can read a room as well. When there's people hoarding around the house and dropping off casseroles and all of that. And about a week later, his van was picked up from the firehouse and driven back to our home. And my grandfather said that I ran right out the front door, down the driveway, and started yelling, "He's home, Daddy's home." So I don't know at what moment for me I had realized that he wasn't coming back. But as a child that young, the concept of death isn't one that a child should have. But I think it set in fairly quickly.
You were presented at some stage with your father's protective fire helmet, I understand, but his body wasn't found.
His body was never recovered. His helmet was recovered in February of 2002. It was not found with a body, and the helmet was in quite a state. Now the helmet is crushed to about this big, but the badge number, which is a sticker, survived, and that's what enabled us to identify it as his.
Regarding justice, you had some very strong words about justice at the SEFF conference today. Can you elaborate a little bit on those?
So the 9/11 community has been fighting for justice through multiple avenues, whether that's holding accountable the terrorists and 9/11 plotters that we have down in Guantanamo Bay, and those trials are still awaiting. They're apparently due to continue this autumn, but the trial dates have been pushed back and pushed back. But we're also pursuing the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in federal court as well. We're currently waiting on a verdict of whether they'll dismiss the case. Even if they do, we will go to the Southern District Court for appeals. But these are cases that have been ongoing for almost 25 years now. I mean, it's been the majority of my life. And so to a certain degree, you can't hold on to that as your whole life. It could easily consume you. But we've even had to fight for justice and accountability for all of those that are now dying of cancer. And so for me, the firehouse is a brotherhood. The guys that my dad used to work with would dress up as Santa come Christmas time and hand us presents and have at our firehouse Christmas party. And these are men that put their health and their safety on the line to possibly recover my dad's body. And now they're suffering as a result of that, on top of having survivor's guilt. And for them to be denied and denied and denied even basic health coverage is something that we've had to fight for multiple times. And it's still an ongoing thing. 9/11, it hasn't ended for anyone, even physically. It hasn't ended. It's something that they say never forget, but we've been forgotten. But never forget that didn't come with an expiration date.
So you have managed to live your life. You are living your life. You're studying medicine at Trinity University in Dublin. Mm-hmm. You're living in Ireland. You're travelling around the world talking about your dad and talking about the work that you're doing to try to get justice for your dad. Do you feel in another 24 years you'll still be talking about this, or are you feeling hopeful that there will be a conclusion for you? Or is it just this is your life story?
Whether we achieve justice in a courtroom or not, I will never stop talking about my dad. I will never stop sharing his story. I will never stop educating people about 9/11. I think it's imperative that any victims of terrorism around the world educate the younger generations about what happened and try to prevent it from ever happening again. But also, if it does happen again, we know the tools that are needed to support those victims because we've all walked the same walk. But I will always talk about my dad. I'll always share my story, whether it's empowering or not. It's my life, and I only had him for 4 years, but I wouldn't change that for the world. I think there's a quote that says, better to have loved and lost than to have never loved at all. And I'm lucky that I was brought up by Superwoman. She played mom and dad and raised 4 kids by herself, and I absolutely would not be in the position that I'm in now if it was not for my mother.
So you've attended the SEFF conference here as a guest, as a panellist. How do you think it went today?
I think it was great. Personally, it was lovely to connect with other victims, and few words were needed in terms of them understanding the walk of life we've all gone through. But I think it was also very important for the sake of dialogue, of having not just victims from Northern Ireland, but having an international perspective, and even the other people in the audience that have been affected by the Troubles to see there's more of us, and there's more of us from different generations, and there's more of us from different countries, and this is a universal experience, sadly, but I think it makes you feel more heard, that there's others in this unfortunate club that none of us wanted to be a part of. There was definitely some tense moments in terms of discourse, but it's imperative that we have those conversations.
Do you leave here today feeling hopeful?
It's an interesting question. I leave here with a sense of gratitude of having met the people that I did today. As for my own situation, my opinion hasn't changed on where we stand in that. I feel grateful to see that these conversations are still taking place here in Northern Ireland, because having known other victims, I know it's ongoing for them, even though the media has forgotten a lot of it. So I'm hopeful that the situation here will continue to improve and more people will get justice. Even though it's been, over 40 years for some people, it's something that enables people to move on with their lives.
My name is Íñigo. My father was Ángel Pascual. He was the top manager of a nuclear power plant, and he was murdered by the Spanish terrorist group ETA in 1982.
So when ETA struck your father, you were actually in the car with him?
Yeah,
And you were
that's true.
17?
I was 17 years old, yeah.
And you witnessed your father's murder?
Yeah.
And how many years did it take for you to start talking about this?
If I have understood well your question, it took me 30 years to begin to talk about what had happened to me, because there was a big pain inside me that I wanted to hide that pain and that what has happened. So I never talked of this with my wife, children, my mother, my sister, until 30 years ago after the murder.
Do you feel more free today?
Yeah.
More healthy today?
Yeah, 100%.
Because you've been able to talk?
Yeah, 100%. Because when I was young, I didn't understand that to talk about what has happened would help me to feel better.
And you described earlier at the SEFF conference how you felt you were in a dark tunnel and that you had suicidal thoughts.
Yes, at the end of the 4th year, I didn't find a reason to live because everything in my life was bad.
You were so sad.
I was close to suicide.
No, but you were very sad.
I was
sad.
I was so sad that, for example, watching my mother and sister to suffer every day, all of them suffer in different ways. For example, my mother didn't understand what was happening in Spain. ETA continued to killing people, and my sister failed at school, and one of them give up eating and lose 35 kilos. The other doesn't talk to anybody except us, and was only on his room to eat, to drink, and to go to school, to university. And they were very difficult years for me.
So the family was broken?
Yeah, the family
broken?
Yeah, the feeling was broken. And my father asked me to take care of them, and I couldn't do that.
So before your father died, he asked you, if anything happens to me,
exactly.
You're the boss.
Yes, I am the
That's a lot
boss,
of
and I had to take care of the family, and I couldn't do that. Is why I feel so bad. And at the end of the 4th year after my father's murder, I tried to suicide. Because I really wanted to suicide, and the other car escape, find a place to hide, and at the last second, I was driving 80, 100 kilometers per hour, and the other 50, 60.
When you look back on that memory, and you look back on that broken heart, and you look back on the fact that there was no big crash and you lived, do you feel happy? Do you feel glad?
No, No.
Do you feel relieved that you survived?
No, no. I would have changed my life from my father's life. Every time I would have tried to do it. I mean, if there is a God that say, now you're going to die and your father is going to live, I would have changed immediately. But at the end of the 4th year after my father's murder, when I discovered what kind of guy I was to try to kill a family, because in the other car there was a family, what kind of coward, fucking coward I was, I feel really bad. And I began to go to the psychologist to improve.
So you're very happy that nobody else died?
Exactly, absolutely happy.
But you
not happy with me,
yeah.
but not happy with me.
But you understand today,
Yeah.
looking back, why you felt so...
Yeah, I understand why I do this, and maybe if I've gone to the psychologist before, maybe I never have tried to suicide. That's right. Yeah.
But today you've got power.
Yeah, it's true, because I have told my story many times to very different types of people. For example, mass media, nuclear council, European Parliament, the students at school, at university, group of people in the society, and I see kindness in the eyes of the people I talk to.
And hope.
Yeah, and hope. Yeah.
So there were 3 things you said today.
Yeah.
Tell us those.
Hope, hate, and pardon. That you say forgiveness is the same, I think.
So the hope is that this will never happen again.
Yeah.
The hatred is that you have no hatred.
The hate is that I am a lucky man because I never heard a word of hate of my mom, so I don't hate.
And the pardon is a very personal thing to you.
Yeah.
It's about how you live, forgiving yourself, and we all deal differently with forgiveness.
Exactly.
And that's
in my case, it's very hard for me listen the news and watching some terrorists to drink champagne when they kill someone and forgive them. It's very difficult for me. Maybe if the mother of my father came to me and with a real feeling they told me to forgive them, maybe I will do.
Not yet.
But not yet.
My name is Darren Frost. I was involved in the London Bridge terror attack in 2019 at Fishmongers Hall, where I intervened alongside others to apprehend or prevent a terrorist perpetrator from killing more people.
What age were you then?
I have no idea. What was I? So my memory has been seriously affected from this. I think I was 38 or 39. But unfortunately since then my memory has been a bit shocked, so I can't really distinguish time and stuff since then.
So your memory, you're telling me that your memory has been a bit shot. You're saying that your body has changed physically, even your taste buds changed. Talk to me a little bit about those things that I don't think anybody would really understand unless they've been through extreme trauma. Tell me about this thing you told me about milk earlier.
Yeah, so it's some strange things that I've recognized or learned with myself. So I never experienced any physical injury. I did blank out after I thought the bomb was going to explode, and I came to again about 4 or 5 minutes later. And when I came to, my brain wasn't the same brain as prior to the event. I was struggling with short-term memory and processing. I couldn't remember a single item, so if I had to do something, I would walk to the next room, and by the time I was there, I wouldn't know why I was there, and I'd just be stood lost in the room. And that continued for about a year. But I also realized that something physiological must have changed, because I could no longer drink milk. It was all too fatty in my mouth, and the way that I tasted and sensed things was all different.
Like an intensity.
Yeah,
Everything was
an
more intense.
intensity, but also for at least the first 2 months, I wasn't hearing or seeing anyone. It was just a replay of the video of those horrific events going over and over. So if I was speaking to you like I am now, I would give some responses, but all I'd be seeing actually in my mind's eye was a repeat on like a cycle of all that trauma and the killing. And yeah, it was invasive because I just couldn't control it or stop it.
You're at the SEFF conference today in Lisbon for the UN Day of Victims and an Anti-Terror Day. And you read a poem that you say you wrote after a really bad dream. You're having, I presume you had daymares and nightmares. And you said that you're no poet, but the room was stock still at the end of that poem. Explain a little bit about how you wrote that.
So sleep was not my friend after the incident, and the NHS are not keen to give you too much Valium or anything like that, because that can cause other troubles in itself. So for the first 2 months, sleep was really difficult. And I would have a lot of nightmares when I did sleep. And one night, probably about 8 months after the incident, I woke up again after a severe nightmare, and just started writing on my phone, and the poem just came out. I never edited it. It was just like that, and I put down the phone again, and then when I woke up in the morning, I found it pre-written on my phone, not really having much memory of writing it, and that's the poem that I now share.
But it's a reflection of your experience where the police at the time were trying to come in, get their hands on this perpetrator, but you knew if you let go of his hand that he had a bomb and he could have detonated that and everybody would have been killed.
So there were it was quite complex. There were two things going on in my mind. The one was, this guy's got a trigger and he's going to set off this bomb and kill the police and the public who are around. The second was, I was trying to save the terrorist's life. And this is very complex and difficult, but I thought he wanted death by suicide, death by police. And I'd seen what he had done, and he had taken that choice from others inside. So I didn't want him to have that choice. So I was trying to hold his hands to prevent him from being killed by the police. I wanted them to arrest him. But then he looked up at the police and said, "I've got a bomb," in a gentle voice. The police looked down and their voice broke. They were like, "He's got a bomb, he's got a bomb." And finally his voice came out and he said, "He's got a bomb." And that's when the whole tempo changed. And funny enough, that was the moment I thought I'd lost control of the situation. And that's when the police pulled me off balance and I let go. And I actually thought the bomb exploded at that point. I heard 3 bangs and I thought that was us all dead. But then when I turned around, I saw that it was gunshots that mostly happened. I thought they shot him in the head, but they didn't. They actually shot him in the side, and he was still alive for another good 5 minutes, 10 minutes after that.
You became known as the narwhal guy because you actually took a narwhal tusk from a wall in the building in London that you were in.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a strange way to be identified, but you looked like you were going into war at that stage. When you see the video of you walking down those steps with those other guys, and one had a fire extinguisher, you had this big tusk, you had no idea what you were walking into, did you?
Well, I did, because inside the hall before, I had come down and I had addressed him and I stopped him, and that's when he threatened us with the bomb, and he said that he wasn't there to attack me, he was waiting for the police, and when the police arrived he was going to blow it up. So the only reason I didn't still have that initial narwhal tusk was because that's when Steve Gallant threw the chair and he went to kill Steve Gallant, who was stood next to me. But now Steve had nothing to defend himself, so that's the moment I thought the next person in danger was Steve, so I passed him the first narwhal tusk to defend himself. But then I was just nearly as close as I am to you in front of the terrorist, unarmed, and I thought, no, I'm not doing any good. So I went to go get the second narwhal tusk. So by the time I came back to those stairs, I'd seen the 2 8-inch knives, I'd seen 2 women that he had already stabbed multiple times, and I'd seen the bomb, which looked very convincing. So I knew 100% what I was running into the second time. But mysteriously, from the moment my hands touched that first narwhal tusk, no one's blood but the terrorist offenders was spilled, which is remarkable. And And something mysterious happened on that, running on that bridge. So I had run past Steve and John. They obviously didn't know what to do with themselves. They couldn't run to a man with 2 knives. But when they saw me running at full pelt, they got the courage to follow suit. And so I interacted with the perpetrator straight away. I thought I was on my own, but I stabbed him. He kind of buckled over a little bit. And then when I pulled it out, I was ready for him to attack me again. I didn't know that I then had backup. But the most amazing thing happened. John Crilly tried to spray him with his fire extinguisher, but the wind caught all the spray and perfectly disguised Steve Gallant in the mist. So the perpetrator who I'd just stabbed, who had just buckled over, was slightly off balance. Steve was disguised in this mist of smoke, who then was now by his back shoulder, so out of the way of the blades, and then able to pull him off balance backwards. So it was this, you couldn't choreograph such perfect timing to the millisecond, but it all worked in synchronicity, and it's as if there was a greater power orchestrating or conducting that, and we worked together. But then that's the moment that I jumped on his back and pushed the knives out so that he couldn't slash at anyone, and the public came and started kicking him in the head, and so I shifted to protect his head and said to everyone, don't kick him, don't hit him, take the knives off him. Because for me, that was the more important issue at the time.
If I was to go through that as a movie script,
it wouldn't be believed.
Somebody would say, Jilly, that's too far-fetched.
Yeah.
We need to change this.
Yeah, we need people to believe this. Yes. Yeah.
But you have lived that day in, day out since that day. Have you ever worked out where you got that courage from?
Well, there was a really interesting... something happened when I was a lot younger, when I was actually in nursery school, and there was a kid bullying me, and another kid who was a year older, Troy Hunt, actually came in and intervened and pushed the boy away and said, you don't bully him anymore. If you do that, you have to see me. So that was part of that.
And what age would you have been at that stage?
Probably 4 years old.
Single figures?
Yeah, probably 4 years old.
So that had stayed in your DNA somewhere.
Yeah, so that's part of it.
The SEFF conference that you were with today, you were here as a panellist today. It's been a very emotional day.
It has.
There's been a few tears, there's been a little tiny bit of laughter, and there's been some gasps of disbelief at some of the suggestions that have been made by guests about forgiveness. And where do you lie with all of that situation about forgiveness?
So I think forgiveness is it's an individual choice, and it's the choice of the victim and survivors to make of that as they wish, and no one else can tell them what they should or shouldn't do. It is highly emotive. It can be very healing, I believe, but it's a personal choice, and some people take comfort in not forgiving. So I don't think there's a right and a wrong answer. I think it can help alleviate the burden if you do forgive, but there's no requirement. No one can tell you what you have to think, feel, or do.
And what do you understand to be your situation, to be your position on that?
Rather than forgive, I try to understand. I try to understand the journey. How could someone do something so horrendous to the people who are fighting his cause? That's what's outrageous to me. And so I try and understand his journey, and as far as the information I can get, his journey was quite chaotic himself, and we've got a lot to look into our own society of how we treat people and how we push people to the fringes, and when they try and find comfort in the most dangerous places. We've got a responsibility to look after all of our citizens and try and not isolate and push them to those extreme fringes, and also not to remove hope. So this individual had gone to prison, rightly so, but when he came out, he applied for over 200 jobs. We took away his friendship groups, we took away his potential for any purpose in life, and when you take away all those things, you need to put something in its place. So in terms of forgiveness, I look at understanding. I don't try and justify. I never justify those actions, and nothing can justify violence. However, I try and understand. So I don't look at forgiveness. I still haven't made my mind up whether or not I forgive. I'm still undecided on that court. So.
But you have suffered trauma as a result of maybe the lack of service to this guy. Do you think your life is more positive today than it was, more negative? I mean, are you thriving, surviving?
Yeah, it's a mixed bag. I actually think that the traumas people go through can define and change their lives, and for me that is absolutely the case. I've lost some of my abilities in terms of memory, but I have got this drive that is unstoppable. I will not listen to threats, whether that's from government or other people. I will do what I feel is morally just and right, regardless of where it comes from. I don't care about money, I don't care about power, I don't care about political influence. I will do to my dying day what I believe to be right. And that kind of drive you can't buy or create. And I think that is a byproduct of that tragedy.